Hi, my name is Madison Thompson, and this is my Phylum Project Archive for Bacillariophyta, and this is for Biology 102, Section 4. So the phylum Bacillariophyta comes from the Greek roots bacillus and phyto, meaning stick and plant, respectively. It refers to all the organisms in this phylum, which all have a common rod-like structure, meaning they're all coming in a thin cylindrical line, which explains the name. And all of these organisms characteristically have diatoms or are split into overlapping halves. So they're at least symmetrical in some form, and they're typically symmetrical in many ways, and that each part of the organism is composed of the same structure. They have yellow-brown chloroplasts filled with chlorophylls A, C1, C2, B-carotene, glucoxanthine, and xanthophylls. And this makes them different from other photosynthetic organisms because most of the time when you think of photosynthesis, you think of something green, like the tree back there. However, photosynthesis can be done by several other chemicals, not just chlorophyll, and this is seen in this organism that's yellow-brown. The specific organism in question is actually a genus, not a species. It was provided by Dr. Bohr in lab, and it's Mellocyra. And you can't identify the specific species, unfortunately, because there's just so many, and we don't know exactly what sample we got. So for this species here on the right, I put it varies. And there is a species, Mellocyra varians, which describes like the common species, but there's no way to know for sure exactly what species we were looking at. So we know it was a diatom, and that's a common name. But instead, we're going to look at the genus as a whole. But if we had to make a guess, it was most likely Mellocyra varians. The name of Mellocyra comes from the Greek words melon and Syria, meaning it's a melon-like chain, where melon means melon and Syria means chain. This describes the spherical shape and the linkage of Mellocyra organisms as they come together to form chains of diatoms instead of just one. And this allows them to better survive and reproduce because as they form chains, they're larger, which makes them less of an easy prey for predators, if you could say. And it also makes it easier for them to survive and reproduce because they're right there with each other, so they can reproduce easily. And catching food in the chain is much easier than catching food as an individual if they were to do so. But they're photosynthetic, so it's not really an issue. So here's some images. Like I said, this is the closest we could get with the microscope in the middle. So you can see with the mouse, so it's very difficult to tell what type of organism it is. Then over here, this is not a close-up. This is just the diatoms as a whole. But you can tell by the yellow-brown color that it is a diatom when you zoom in. And if you look following the mouse, you can see that it's a chain. So the formation of chains also gives a hint to that. The mode of nutrition for this organism is a photoautotroph, which means it produces its own energy, and it does so photosynthetically. So it takes in light energy from the sun through the standard photosynthesis equation, 6H2O plus 6CO2 plus sunlight yields C6H12O6 and 6O2. And this is glucose synthesized via photosynthesis. And the organelle that does this is still the chloroplast. It's just filled with chlorophyll and several other pigments that help the organism to undergo photosynthetic reactions. It converts energy from sunlight into usable forms and gains carbon from the atmosphere to complete photosynthesis. Carbon is intaken through stromas, which are openings in the cell that allow it to process nutrients from the air and to control its concentration of water or its osmotic fluctuations. So the mode of reproduction is sexual reproduction, and this is gametic meiosis. Something interesting about diatoms is that they undergo a haplontic lifestyle. So elaborate on this a little bit. First, gametic meiosis is when an egg cell and a sperm cell meet, both as diploids. They're fertilized into a gamete, and then it grows from there into several other cells through mitosis. So here on the life cycle, you can see that for most of their life, diatoms are in the haploid state, and they undergo meiosis as a diploid, but then they split into two again, and they'll return to a vegetative cell, divide, and they'll fertilize with each other. So this could be one cell and another cell fertilizing each other, or it could be a process of self-fertilization. And then that's when they're actually in their diploid form, and that's very rare for them. It's only when they're a gamete that they're in their diploid form, and then they'll split back up again from meiosis and go through the process all over again. So they have a fairly quick lifestyle because they do split right when they're able to, right when they get into that G2, I guess, phase, when they have enough nutrients and they're a large size. But it's just important that they stay as a haploid for most of their lives. The source, range, and distribution of this organism. So this sample of Melosira was harvested from NCA&T's farm on March 27, 2022. Melosira are found in freshwater and saltwater ecosystems, which are located dispersively across the globe. Because their systems are located dispersively, as a whole, the population is located dispersively. However, if you were to zoom in on one of these ecosystems, you would see a clump distribution as they form chains together. So they're in a clump distribution in dispersive location. So depending on the scale, they could be clumped or dispersed in their distribution. And in the aquatic ecosystems they're located in, they are more or less abundant depending on the available resources. So the argument, okay. So depending on how many resources are available, if you've heard of algal blooms, this is a common occurrence. So in an algal bloom, when there's an abundance of oxygen and nitrogen, or carbon dioxide and nitrogen, the organisms will grow, the algae will grow, and it'll cover sometimes the entire surface of a body of water. And then once it's exhausted all of the carbon dioxide, it dies and quits producing oxygen. There's just a dead zone where nothing can survive in that area. So depending on the surplus of nutrients, they'll either grow ginormously like that, or they won't grow at all because there won't be anything to undergo photosynthesis with. The habitat for these organisms are found in all aquatic ecosystems. They don't discriminate between freshwater, brackish water, and saltwater. They're found in all. But their habitat must contain carbon dioxide, water, and other macronutrients needed for the survival of all organisms. Carbon dioxide and water are particularly important because they're key components in the photosynthesis equation. They prefer temperate oceanic areas, particularly the Baltic Sea, New England, and northern cold water regions, such as the Oslo Fjord in Norway. And this implies that they might have a little bit of a thermophile nature because they're able to survive in cold waters, even though temperate waters are more preferred for this organism. The primary ecological role of diatoms is to perform photosynthesis and provide energy for other organisms. They're at the bottom of the trophic pyramid, and they have to provide energy for all of this still. So that results in a situation where they have to produce a lot of energy very quickly. And this is seen by the fact that they carry out 20 to 25% of all carbon fixation for the Earth. And so they're a major component of plankton as well, since they're found in salt water, and most algae aren't. So they're a large part of plankton in that symbiotic relationship where they produce carbon fixation and oxygen. And they can cause algal blooms and devastate a given ecosystem if they're allowed to grow greatly, like we talked about previously, because they can wipe out all the oxygen and not have any carbon fixed, so the organisms can't survive, period, because they don't have carbon or oxygen, both of which are essential to the survival of all organisms. So if the species was removed, there would be a mass death and there would be a trophic cascade where organisms high on the trophic pyramid fell down and died because there was nothing to support them at the bottom of the trophic pyramid where these diatoms are. And here are my references.